George Ramos. George, before I even really knew him, I knew of him because he had been long known when he was working for the Los Angeles Times as a reporter as a real friend of Cal Poly, in particular a real friend of journalism students. He would come back frequently, address students, and he was known to be somebody who was very valuable, or very generous rather, with his time in dealing with students. I later came to know George even more when he was the chairman of the journalism department and I was serving on the advisory board, and I found that what I had known about him before was even more true, that for him it was all about the students and their benefit and how he could prepare them for the world after college. Here's more about George Ramos.
Everywhere he went in his all-too-short life, George Ramos was a pioneer. He sometimes joked that as a Cal Poly journalism student in the 1960s, he was the university's affirmative action program. From his early work at Mustang Daily throughout a distinguished career at the Los Angeles Times, George was a tenacious, compassionate reporter and editor, tackling his craft with zeal, but never taking himself too seriously. His sharing in a Pulitzer Prize for the paper's groundbreaking portrait of LA's Latino community was the first of 3 such honors he helped bring to the Times. In 2003, George returned to Cal Poly full-time to lead the journalism department as chair, taking his lifelong commitment to training the next generation of journalists to a new level.
Then is always now. You always remember your roots, remember who you are, where you've come from, what motivated you, the sacrifices your parents, your grandparents made for you. I make sacrifices too for the next generation of reporters. That's why I'm here. And that's why I am the way I am.
Pride in his country and heritage, and an unsurpassed dedication to journalism in Cal Poly all make George Ramos a standout member of Mustang Media's Hall of Fame.
To present the award tonight for George Ramos is Tracy Campbell, Vice President of Digital Advocacy for the California Hospital Association. She is also a journalism graduate and a member of the Journalism Advisory Board. And accepting the award for George is Brian De Los Santos, digital editor at the LA Times and representing the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. Tracy.
Thank you and good evening. I am an 82 grad. George and I were friends for 30 years, and I have several distinguished members of his community here this evening as well. We are honoring George posthumously, but he is with us, I know, in spirit, and also his mustache. I never knew George without his mustache, so in the Hall of Fame, there are going to be 2 of them. I wanted to start with a little bit about George. As my friend, he would be a little bit amazed and a little bit uncomfortable that we were honoring him here tonight, because to George, he was always just a rough kid and street kid from East Los Angeles. And this would be something that would make him very uncomfortable, but that's why we're here tonight. In his words, that was then, this is now. And so that was then when he grew up in East LA. Now is when we get to honor his accomplishments. 5 years after his passing, we're here tonight to pay a tribute to a man that was, as the video said, a tough and tenacious reporter out of Los Angeles. He's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, a Vietnam veteran who served his country well, a professor, a mentor, and my friend for 30 years. He was all of those. He was a passionate champion for his students, whether they be Cal Poly, USC, or in Arizona. And he was a proud Hispanic American. After studying journalism at Cal Poly in the late 60s, George returned to his roots in Los Angeles. He started his distinguished career as a reporter at Copley Newspapers and the San Diego Union, and then joined the Times in 1978. He would make the Times his home for 25 years. I'm going to quote a very good friend of his and a colleague from the Los Angeles Times. He was a very strong street reporter, He knew Los Angeles well, said his pal and colleague Frank Sotomayor. He was able to talk to people and to get their stories, and storytelling is what George did best. While at the Times, George and Frank wrote and co-edited a 27-part series called Latinos in Southern California. If you haven't read it, I suggest you take a moment to do so. It won the Los Angeles Times Pulitzer Prize in 1984. The winning team of 18, and his words, Mexican-American journalists, reporters, photographers, and editors chronicled Southern California's Hispanic culture where he came from. It was the faces that he knew. George continued to capture the characters and the times of his city and contributed to 2 more Pulitzer Prize-winning teams for the Times, the 1992 LA riots and the 1994 Northridge earthquake. In 2003, George returned to his Cal Poly roots. As he had done so in LA, he always returned to his roots and came back to Cal Poly, the other place he loved, becoming chair of the journalism department. He commanded the same Mustang daily newsroom and the dingy classrooms in Building 26, where we were all today, where we had once studied. George and I used to joke that we bled green and gold, and that would look better on the walls than the beige in the Building 26. This is not the first time that George has been recognized with a Hall of Fame award. In 2007, he was inducted into the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, an honor that brought this tough guy to tears. You see, George had a huge heart and an immense passion for those things that he held dear: his cultural roots, his craft, his City of Angels, his Dodgers, Cal Poly, and his students. Accepting the Cal Poly Student Media and Journalism Hall of Fame Award tonight is Brian De Los Santos, digital editor at the Los Angeles Times, and Region 8 Director for the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. And I just, before I bring Brian up, just learned this evening that he is part of, and just learned last week that the Los Angeles Times has won another Pulitzer. He is part of the Pulitzer-winning team for the coverage of San Bernardino. Brian, congratulations.
I'm so honored to be here to represent the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and in some way the LA Times as well. George's institution in Latino media. If you were young like myself and you looked up for mentors, he was always there with open arms. I personally did not know George, but like all of my journalism friends knew him. Everyone who was part of the student projects, which are now named the George Ramos Student Projects at the NAHJ, which is the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and so many people came, and they came through him, and he mentored so many of my friends. One little thing that I will share that it's not about me today, but people like him, being a Latino in a newsroom, being a Latino winning Pulitzer Prizes, and just representing who he was as a person of color meant so much to this person who came from Mexico, who is bilingual, who didn't see himself really working in media until I started reading things that he would write or things that his colleagues would write at LA Times, and that really made me feel passionate about journalism, made me feel like I had a place in journalism. So whether I knew George or not, he still impacted my life. And I'm so glad to be here with all the other people who are here in studying media. You guys keep doing what you gotta do. And the person who said, oh, I don't have a job yet, keep pushing, because I was in that spot and now I'm at the LA Times. And so you have a space somewhere for you too. And I'm so honored to be here. So thank you, and may George rest in peace.
Step over there so they can get a picture.
Congratulations.